Well, folks, here we are again for the weekly forecast. Before we get to the main forecast, kind of give you an update of what we anticipate in regards to the flood situation on the Platte River as the water from the big rain event on the Front Range of the Rocky Mountains has slowly made its way toward Nebraska, and as we go through this next 10-day period, we'll pass through the state. We do expect that the floodwaters will reach central Nebraska as we get into late this weekend, early part of next week. We're probably looking at that surge of water making it up to Columbus by midweek to late next week, and then we will see it finally make its way to the Missouri River sometime toward the end of the month. We don't expect the degree of flooding as this floodwater pushes eastward as we've seen in western Nebraska. Of course, the river channel itself widens out secondarily with this couple years of drought that we've been seeing within the basin. There's a lot of room to store some of this water through infiltration, so we should see a lesser impact as we move downstream, but certainly lowland flooding is a distinct possibility, particularly as we get into central Nebraska, and then it'll lessen as it moves up toward the Columbus area. Over this last week, of course, we did see that warm up during the middle part of the week before we seen a cold front come through, and we did see some decent precipitation totals isolated from portions of southeast Nebraska into southwestern Nebraska, much lesser totals as you moved up toward the South Dakota border. And actually, as those thunderstorms passed through southeast Nebraska, we did see some localized heavy rainfall and high winds that did bring some corn down, but not to the extent of this line as it moved into central Iowa, where wind gusts in the Des Moines and Ankeny area were up to almost 90 miles per hour, and we did see some reports of considerable down corn. So it'll be interesting to see how, with all the problems they've had here the last few days, or last few months, whether or not that's going to further decrease the yield potential in central Iowa. Now, as we take a look at the upper air forecast, we have a relatively decent forecast ahead of us, particularly this weekend, before we start turning our attention to another system moving in. So let's take a look at the upper air models and see how this week will progress. And right now we do have basically this high pressure system aloft. The cool air that came in over the last 24, 36 hours will slowly make its way eastward. We should see decent conditions today, temperatures basically in the 70s for most locations, and then we will see this trough begin to move in from the western United States. It's a fairly fast moving system, but it's going to move toward the northeast, so we could see precipitation breaking out in the panhandle during the afternoon hours, and particularly over the overnight hours as the surface cold front starts to make its way across the state. And by the time we get into Monday, we'll see that upper air trough is now centered over eastern South Dakota, and we will see some energy wrapping around this. So there is a chance for thunderstorm activity across central eastern Nebraska, particularly on Monday, and this will probably clear the state as we get into the later afternoon hours of Monday. So by Tuesday, what we will see is the flow flattening out, fairly nice conditions, pretty much seasonal, maybe slightly above normal. Then we'll turn our attention to another trough moving into the Pacific Northwest. So by the time we get to Wednesday, this system itself digs down fairly deeply. It's going to increase our winds from the south, warm our temperature up rather dramatically. We should make it back up into the 80s in a lot of locations. And on Thursday, the system sits here and parks over the central Rockies, so there'll be good precipitation. We should start to see the cold front making it into northwestern Nebraska, and we'll start to see a dramatic cool down. And particularly as we get into Friday, we'll start to see some of that energy translating into western Nebraska and a decent shot of scattered showers and thunderstorms. So in terms of the temperature forecast, we're looking primarily at the 80s across western Nebraska. We'll be looking more in the 70s to maybe low 60s as we move to the end of the week. And as we go into the forecast, above normal temperatures across the east from next Thursday to the following Tuesday. In terms of precipitation, with that trough in the west, we'll see an increase in moisture.